Hello, everyone. Theodora, shall we make a start? Great. Welcome to the webinar from the Interagency Standing Committee on our learning package on protection from sexual misconduct. Those of you who have joined us, thank you so much for staying on mute during the presentation. And also, please, if you could turn off your video, because Theodora will be presenting a PowerPoint and some videos for you to see on the screen, and this will make it easier for all of us to see it. We will be also receiving questions via the chat box, which at the end of Theodora's presentation, she'll be able to answer. So we're very lucky today to have with us Theodora, who's kind of the mastermind behind this learning package, and I hope that you will be able to take advantage of her training skills in person someday. Unfortunately, with the circumstances, we are presenting this package virtually, and it is a learning package that has been developed based upon a learning package that IOM is using internally and has made available for other agencies, and with the contribution of UNHCR and WFP to develop it into an interagency, and also with the participation of NGO consortia such as the International Council of Voluntary Agencies, ICVA, the Steering Committee, CHS Alliance, OCHA, Norwegian Refugee Council, UNICEF, and others. And then it was presented through the IASC for use and adoption for all participating agencies. I think I'll end my introduction there and hand the floor over to Theodora.
Thank you so much, Wendy, and thank you everyone for connecting today. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I will to make this presentation relatively short to give us enough time to have a discussion at the end. So let me more or less present for around 30 minutes and then leave space for questions. As Wendy said, we are going to go through the material of this new interagency package. What I've done is that I've presented it in a way that hopefully should make easy for you to access the website and understand what is the material you will be finding. So let me start with a little bit of background on the methodology that this package is using. This is a basic training on sexual misconduct, on how to recognize and address sexual misconduct, being sexual exploitation and abuse or sexual harassment. It is based on a very known academic methodology. We are not referring to any bulletin, any policy, anything like that. The methodology used is really to ask fundamental questions to the participants, and through the training, help finding an answer that makes sense in line with the bulletin, the policies we are all bound to. The idea is also to use live cases, real cases that every one of the participating agencies have encountered in their daily operations. And also, the idea is to open discussions around these issues that are very often difficult to discuss. And so this training is supposed to give time for a team, for an office, for a group of people working together on humanitarian service delivery to discuss about these issues that sometimes can make people feel quite uncomfortable. It is all based on empathy. The whole module is asking the participant, as far as possible, to step into the shoes of the victim, the perpetrator, the humanitarian worker, and see how different point of views are important to consider in cases of sexual exploitation and abuse. And again, the methodology has been tested and tested again. I won't stop saying that. And this, what you're going to see now, it's really where we stand at the moment. For sure, it can be improved, but a lot of the things have been tested and are now they have been now developed based on the many feedbacks we have received. Okay, so this is what's happening when you go to the IASC website on the training, and here you see you can download the training session, you can download the handouts and all the activities, you can download the facilitator notes, and you can download all the videos. Okay, so if you click on every one of these links, you will be able to download directly all the material that we are going to see today. The idea is really that with a little bit of preparation and with some background on protection, anyone can be able to deliver this basic training package. Okay, the whole structure, it's a modular structure. So the whole package is built on different modules, and every module has more or less the same internal structure. First of all, it starts with a fundamental question. Then there is an exercise or a test. There is a collective activity for each module, a discussion, and then, as we said, finding the answer together, and then a debrief to move to the next module. The idea is that as you unfold these modules, you create the path to understanding how to prevent sexual exploitation and abuse and sexual harassment. The idea is also that if you don't have enough time to deliver the whole package in one go, you can deliver it by modules, and you will still follow a kind of organized approach. So this is how the PowerPoint looks when you are not presenting on full screen. There are some hidden slides that are supposed to help the facilitators in explaining the material. And every slide comes with facilitator notes. So you don't need actually to have much more than your PowerPoint to be able to use the material. The whole training is based on a case study. It's the case study of Frida. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, everything is based on real stories that have been anonymized and make, unrecognizable, but they are all real. So Frida is really the field conductor of the training. And you have a Frida in 3 different formats. You have a Frida case on a video, which we will watch later. You have a Frida on a comics, so that if you have if you are delivering in a place with good internet connection and good facilities, you can use the video, but you have also options to have trainings in a much more difficult context. So let's watch Frida, because it's going to be important to understand how the rest of the training develops.
This funny and handsome young man laughing with a group of friends is Abel, a relief distribution officer working for a local NGO. The NGO that Abel works for is a UN partner organization that recently opened a reception center next to Abel's village. Abel is known as a very caring young man, as he's always trying to give back to others what life has given to him. At work, he's very caring and professional with the beneficiaries. The young lady he's saying hello to is one of them. Her name is Frida. She's a 17-year-old girl living on her own near the reception center. Like everyone else here, she thinks Abel is really friendly. She's very shy, but eventually finds the courage to say hello to him for the first time. But probably not the last time. Despite this new friendship with Abel, Frida feels lonelier every day. She's completely dependent on humanitarian support and she hates her life here. Her closest friend, Lara, convinces her that the only way to have a better life would be to become Abel's special friend. As an NGO staff member, he could surely provide her with some extra resources and maybe even help her move to another country where she could start a new life. She could even go back to school and become a famous painter. Even though Frida doesn't feel comfortable with Lara's suggestion, she doesn't see any other way out. So one day, she decides to meet Abel at his house. She feels very nervous and confused. Abel is surprised to see her here, but decides to invite her in. After chatting for a bit, she finally tells Abel that if he provides her with some extra services and support, she would be willing to sleep with him. Abel doesn't know what to think. He would have never expected his friend to act this way. But Frida insists. She's a good-looking young girl. Maybe a bit too young. But in Abel's village, girls of her age would be married already. No, maybe he shouldn't. Abel vaguely remembers a training at work on preventing sexual exploitation and abuse. Unfortunately, he has forgotten the details since he did not think the training was important at the time. He believes that the rules probably don't apply to him anyway because he works for a local organization. And Frida is the one who showed interest in him first, after all. And they both really like each other. Why wouldn't he help her anyway? The next day, Abel tells his colleague Faustine what happened. Faustine doesn't feel comfortable with the story. He's not sure if Abel has acted inappropriately. It was a consensual encounter, he thinks. In the meantime, Abel and Frida continue to meet in the evenings at Abel's house. Faustine soon learns that Frida is only 17 years old. This is against the rules of their organization, which forbids sexual relations with anyone under 18 years old, no matter what the legal age of consent of the country is. Speaking with Lara, he also discovers that Frida hopes to use this sexual relationship to gain access to more services or even move to another country. Faustine feels that Abel needs to put an end to these encounters. What if the community finds out about the affair? What if Frida gets pregnant? This won't look good for the organization. Also, will Abel get in trouble? There is too much that could go wrong here. Faustine tells his colleague to either stop meeting with Frida or to formalize their relationship by getting married as soon as possible. Beyond that, Faustine is not sure what else he can or should do, so he decides not to take further action. I have already voiced my concerns to Abel. What he does now is up to him.
Okay, so that's the video. That's really the story that you need to have very clear among the participants to be able to have the training well understood. The other piece that you really need is this questionnaire, because as I mentioned at the beginning, every module try to answer to one fundamental question. So this is the piece that you will give to the participants for them to write on it. So now we will move to every relevant module and look a little bit at what are the questions, what are the type of exercises to unpack the main issues. So, okay, of course, there is an introductory module, which I am not going to present today, but the first really meaty module is about demystifying power relation, trying to unpack the concept of power differential, how to use power in a positive or negative way, and reflect together what is the position power that humanitarian workers have. So as we said, the first question is to ask participants to go back to the case study and identify who holds the power in that particular situation. And then the structure of the training makes you debrief about the position of the different actors of the story, and it's interesting here to see how the class reacts. Sometimes they blame the victim, sometimes they don't really agree to each other. So, but the facilitator doesn't give any pre-matched answer. Really discuss with the class to make sure that they find some kind of agreement. So when you have answered the question and look at the real situation, you have an exercise. We mentioned that in every module there is something for them to step into the shoes of another person. And so here the exercise that has been retained is the one of the power walk. I'm sure you are familiar with it. What is important is that what you see on the slide is actually the material that you have to have available to organize the training. So these cards are some of the cards you can download from the handouts folder that I showed you on the website, IASC website. So this is a power walk tailored to sexual exploitation and abuse. There is another one tailored to a situation of sexual harassment. This is for the facilitator to decide whether to use both of them or only one. And then this is just a picture to remind all of us how a power walk works. And we can discuss that later if you want. But of course, there are instructions on the facilitator guidelines. Then you discuss about power dynamics, and then you move to the third module. So with the first module, you have looked at the concrete case and you have started unpacking power dynamics. Then you need to move to what are we actually talking about. As we said, we don't give definitions. We don't expect people to refer to the Secretary General Bulletin by heart. So here it's really to try to see what do they all know something is wrong when you are talking about these issues, but how they define these issues by themselves. So here the idea is really, again, to go back to the case study, ask a question, and ask them to answer to this question. And then the test for module 3 is to show some real scenarios and ask the class to identify where they would categorize these small scenarios. So you have different examples, and then you discuss with them how do they think that and why they think that this case is a sexual harassment, this case is a sexual abuse, and so on. Interesting is to see that hardly there is agreement on definitions. You know, they all, as I said, they all think something is wrong, but there is a lot of uncertainty on which category of misconduct this type of behavior should be classified under. So then when you have agreed that it is difficult to categorize issues because it's not a clear-cut border, basically, you go back to your case studies, and then we have a summary of a very simplified table of what it's considered sexual exploitation, what is considered sexual abuse, and what is considered sexual harassment, to make sure that everybody understands more or less the same and agrees on a definition. Then, so now you have unpacked power dynamics, you have looked at what we are actually talking about, and now we are going to look at what are the expected behaviors of humanitarian workers. And here the idea is to make the situation a little bit more complex. You know, it's not always a black and white situation. Sometimes it's borderline, sometimes it's not easy to understand when the line has been crossed. So here, again, the methodology used is the same. You ask the question about the case study, how they can categorize each character acceptable or unacceptable behavior. You have a discussion about the different type of behaviors. And then here, again, you have a test. And these are real testimonies from, again, agencies that participated in the adaptation of this material for people to discuss. So I'm gonna, if it works, I'm gonna make you listen a few of them just to give you a sense. And the fact we found that the fact that they can actually hear voices makes the feeling of participation much stronger. Okay, let me see.
A colleague looked at another colleague in a very sexual way and said, "Oh my God, if my wife knew what I was thinking of while I'm looking at you, she would kill me." And then that's it. The other colleague, her face turned red, she wanted to cry, and she just left the room without saying anything. A colleague looked at another colleague in a very sexual way and said, "Oh my God," and she just
And we can hear another one.
This refugee I counseled this morning was really upset because she needed a job. She was crying so hard, so I held her, and it seemed to calm her down. I even gave her a kiss on the forehead, just like my mom would. She didn't protest. I also thought about it, and I told her that I'll pull some strings to get her a job.
So these, and there are a lot of testimonials, but it's just to give you an example. It triggers a lot of discussion on what's correct, what's not correct, where do we need to stop, etc.
This refugee
And then to close this module, which is again looking at expected behavior, we have simplified the wording of IASC principle on PSEA, again to create some snapshots way for participants to remember. So they are all simplified, plain English, and we have, you know, taglines, so to speak, that are easy to remember and maybe to put somewhere on a desk and pass to other colleagues. And we have the same for sexual harassment. So this leads to the end of the module 4, expected behavior. And then we are, as I said at the beginning, jumping into the shoes of the victim, or looking at the situation from the perspective of the victim, focusing on empathy as much as we can to make sure that people realize again what we are talking about. Here you have another exercise that again is based on 3 real stories of victims that did manage to be brave enough to come to report to one of the offices, but the reaction of the office was not as it should have. And then the group discussed on what did work, what didn't work, and what can be improved and what should be improved. And they try to imagine what could be the feeling of the victim in such situation. And then you have a bit of an explanation on the consequence on the victim after a trauma. So visible harm, invisible harm, how the behavior changed over time, and things like that. I'm not going to go through this. And here the exercise that we have put together, except the case study, is an exercise that we call the string exercise, and is to try to identify what are the consequences for the victim, for the organization, for the perpetrator, and for the community. So this is, again, I showed you a picture. It's a kind of very interactive exercise where people, each of the person at the center represents the organization, and the people in a circle around her or him are relevant stakeholders working with that organization, and the threads are relations of trust. And then the idea is for the facilitator together with the participant to discuss whether that relation of trust will remain if there is a case of exploitation. And in the majority of the cases, everybody agrees that it won't remain. And it's a very interesting way to actually showcase how at the end of the day, one case of misconduct can lead to extremely negative consequences for the whole community, and at the end for the people we are accountable to. Okay, and then the module number 6, sorry, let me just skip this, is on speaking up. What do you do when there is a case of sexual exploitation and abuse or a sexual harassment? What are the possibilities that are available in your organizations or outside? Let's discuss about those, but also and as you can imagine, they do vary a lot depending on where you are working. But the idea here is really to reflect as a group on why is it so difficult to actually speak up when there is a sexual misconduct happening. And really, again, we go back
5 minutes
to
and leave.
the...
It's just about introduction of the...
May I ask you to mute yourself? Thank you. So again, we go back to the case study. We ask this question about why it would, what has happened in the case study in relation to report. And then there is an exercise which is asking the participants to identify why do they think are the blockages to report for them as staff, but also what do they think are the blockages to report for beneficiaries. And both groups, the group is divided in tables or etc. Can I ask you please to mute yourself? Thank you. And they are supposed to build this wall of blockages and then find possible solutions to how can I say, put down the wall. So making the speaking up process more easier for beneficiaries and for colleagues. And this again, it's a very interesting discussion touching on different issues. Why is it so difficult to report? What are the implications? What does it mean to be scared? What does it mean to be scared about retaliation? And all those things finally put on a table and given time to be discussed. And then, of course, there are some explanation on what are the exact difference between sexual harassment and sexual exploitation and abuse when it comes to obligation of reporting. We go back to the case studies, and but that's really the meat of the module 6. And then we reach module 7, which is a kind of wrap up. The idea is that if people have followed quite well the training, they should be able to complete the last exercise. Here, basically, we are asking them to find a personal commitment, a very tangible personal commitment that they can actually deliver as of the following day in their work context in terms of sexual prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse and sexual harassment. And the idea is that we have an exercise, the puzzle. So we distribute these pieces of puzzle to each table, and every puzzle piece, so to speak, has answers that are linked to the modules we have gone through. So the facilitator asks a series of riddles, and then the table where the answer sits comes and try to build this wall. Hopefully the wall will be built. So I have a short video showing you how it was built the first time we tested this training package, which was in Gaziantep. Great. So every time it has a different shape, but normally they all manage to build it. And then you call each of them to read their personal commitment. And the idea is that that puzzle can stay, can remain in the place where the training has been done, or can be moved to the office as a visual reminder of the training, but also particularly on each personal commitment that can be actually stick on the wall and remain to remind the team about what they said they would do and what they should be doing. So I'll stop here, and I'll take any question you may have or anything that wasn't unclear. I'll be very happy to answer or repeat. Thank you. Ihang, over to you if you want to look at the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the amazing presentation. So I'm looking through the chat to see.
Or,
yeah. Okay, so one question is, have you tried delivering this remotely, given current circumstances and limitations on travel in the foreseeable future? If so, what adaptation did you make?
yeah, that's a very good question. This was developed to be a face-to-face training package, and together with UNHCR, WFP, and OCHA, we had planned to support the rollout in the field, but of course, at the moment, this is not possible. So there have been, everyone has adapted it a bit, but ideally, this remains a face-to-face package that should be delivered hopefully when the situation goes back to normal. In IOM, for example, we use it to deliver WebEx, but personally, I don't think it has the same effectiveness than a face-to-face.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is about what is the estimated time to deliver the training?
So it depends. I mean, it depends also on how interactive is the group. We think that shorter than 4 hours, it's going to be impossible. Roughly, it takes, on average, 6 hours, around 6 hours.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, how is the issue of ensuring the victims are referred to the services covered in this training?
Yeah, so good question, and we didn't stop there, but when in the module where we look at what are the consequences for the victim. There is also a place where each organization is supposed to know about what are the internal procedures and what are the systems in place locally. This needs to be, of course, prepared before the training gets delivered. It's not done in this module. It is expected for the facilitator to adapt to the local context, but it's a very important question. Often participants do not know what should be the referral system for identify victims.
Okay, so the next question is about the term victim versus survivor. I think this has been raised in last session. So could you share with us some insight about deciding to use victim as the main terminology?
Yeah, it was a decision. I am absolutely aware of the discussion and of course the importance of this. However, we have, as I said, this is a kind of basic training for every type of staff and implementing partners in every type of context. And based on our experience, it was, and also looking at the fact that it needed to be translated in a lot of different languages, these seem to be the most understandable way of communicating. But again, if people would like to adapt it, they can adapt it as they want.
Okay, there are many questions about will there be further modules on reporting mechanisms, like maybe community-based or internal reporting mechanisms, and then risks for informants, whistleblowers, survivors, and managing the obligation to do no harm extra. So will there be more like training in the future? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's again something that can be added or adapted. As I said, and sorry if I wasn't clear, this is a kind of general training. So when we reach the section on reporting mechanism, basically almost every single agency has a different reporting mechanism. So it was, and being a UN agency, an NGO, you name it, they very often have different ways of expecting their staff to report. So it was impossible for us to include all of them. That's why we kept it on the ethical question, how easy it is, why it's not easy, what does it mean to be scared, and answer those questions. And then we expect people facilitating, trying to adapt. For example, if you are training a particular NGO, make sure that you familiarize yourself with the type of reporting mechanism, and then you can dig into that. This is what we have done in IOM. Our reporting module is completely different than the general one because it dwells into our internal reporting mechanisms. So this needs to be adapted by every organization using this package. Because again, if you take the example of protection of whistleblower, again, almost every agency will have a different way of, even if the principle remain the same, the way in which the principle is being implemented may vary quite substantially.
Yes, thank you. So there are many questions about a translation. I know the training package will be soon available in Spanish, Arabic, and Portuguese. So people are asking, when will the French version be available?
Yeah, these are all very good questions, and thanks to the financial support of WFP, the package is being translated in the 3 languages you mentioned. I think there are other agencies that have shown interest in translating it in other languages. So I know that the plan is to have a list of upcoming translations put under the training material, so people will be informed when the new version arrives. But I can't at the moment give you an exact date. I'm sorry. Hopefully very soon, but I don't know the date. And if anybody of you would like to step forward with the, the willingness to translate in one particular language, I think we will be all super grateful. It makes sense to have it translated into as many languages as possible.
Okay, thank you. So the other questions about is kind of technical. So how easy is it to adapt the material? Is it possible to type over the PowerPoints, documents, and move the images around, or is the material protected?
No, the material is not protected. The material can be downloaded and changed. We would appreciate you informing ISAC that, maybe you are adapting, and then we would ask just to put a disclaimer at the beginning saying that this material has been adapted from the original ISAC package. That's it, but it's not protected and can be adapted, or additions can be. I would say more than adapting, additions can be made.
Okay, so yeah, there's another comment that it might be helpful to have modules presenting the fundamental principles, guiding norms extra, and then maybe this could be contextualized. Is this anticipated?
Sorry, Hyung, I'm going to ask you to repeat that question.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, but kindly please repeat.
Yeah, I think it's more like a comment. So it's like it might be helpful to have like modules presenting the fundamental principles or the guiding norms. Yeah. So he's asking if this is anticipated, like if we can make this kind of training includes the fundamental principles and guiding norms.
Okay, sorry. Yes, of course. That was really the idea of a modular approach, that as we see, or as it is felt that more modules should be included or added. It's easier if you want to add a module. So for sure, as I said, this is the beginning, and it's based on a lot of testing. A lot, and it's entry level training. So, but it doesn't mean it's the end. It's actually the beginning of something. So already a few people have expressed the interest to work more on additional modules, and I think that's great.
Okay, thank you, Theodora, for answering the question. I think I will hand my handing to Wendy. Wendy, want to comment?
Hi, thanks so much, Theodora. So, as pointed out, this material is all available on the IASC website, and we will put the web link again in the chat box for everyone. We are available for further questions if you have regarding the use of the material. And please do check back to the website regarding any translations, forthcoming translations, and availability in different languages. It will be posted there.
Okay, great. So as a way of saying goodbye, maybe Wendy, I can just show the last video. So if people are interested to stay and watch it, otherwise I will just thank you very much for the attention, and wish you all the best.
Great, thanks a
I
lot.
will put the video on for people who are interested. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So this is one of the other videos, part of the training package. Hopefully that will trigger your curiosity to download the material. So again, thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Theodora.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.